"I need a wife by tomorrow," said the farmer. What she found out afterwards changed everything. John had always been a hardworking man, but lately the weight of life seemed heavier than ever. His parents had passed away several years ago, leaving him alone to manage the family farm. The farm was not large, but it had been in the family for generations, and John felt a deep responsibility to keep it running. Every morning he woke before sunrise, feeding the animals, fixing broken fences, checking the crops, and making sure the machines were in working order. Life on the farm was quiet, peaceful, and sometimes lonely. John didn't mind the work, but the loneliness had begun to press on him like a heavy cloud. The village where John lived was small, with only a few dozen families scattered across the surrounding fields. Everyone knew each other, and news traveled fast. People often stopped by to visit, trade goods, or ask for help, but John had always preferred to keep to himself. He enjoyed the calm of his own company, the quiet sound of the wind through the trees, and the soft lowing of cows in the early morning. Yet, despite the peace of farm life, there were times when John felt an emptiness in his heart, a part of life he could not fill with chores or animals. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned a soft pink, John realized that he faced a problem he could not solve on his own. A letter had arrived from the local agricultural office. It was a notice that John was eligible for a special grant, money and resources to help improve his farm, but there was a catch. The grant required that the farm be managed by a married farmer. A single man could not qualify. John stared at the letter for a long time, running a hand over his face. He had no family, no wife, no partner. The thought of losing the opportunity to save his farm filled him with a sense of panic. The farm meant everything to him. It was his home, his heritage, and the only life he had ever known. John thought about the people in the village who could help him. Friends, relatives, even neighbors, but most were already busy with their own lives. None of them could marry him just to meet the grant requirement. He felt the weight of time pressing down. The deadline was only a few days away. If he did not find a solution soon, he would lose everything. He walked slowly through his barn, looking at the tools, the animals, and the fields that stretched far into the distance. A sense of desperation grew inside him. He had done everything right all his life, worked hard, lived honestly, cared for his parents, but now it seemed that luck was finally turning against him. That night, John sat in his small kitchen, staring at a cup of tea he did not even feel like drinking. The fire in the stove crackled softly, and outside the wind rustled through the trees. He thought of all the women he had known in the village. Some were kind, some were gentle, some were strong, but none were married to him. Most of them were already families of their own. The thought of asking someone to marry him in such a short time seemed impossible. Yet as he sat there, a bold idea began to take shape in his mind. It was risky, unusual, and perhaps even a little foolish, but John had no choice. The farm could not fail. He needed a wife, and he needed one soon. Emma lived on the edge of the village, in a small house surrounded by flowers and vegetables. She was known for being clever, independent, and strong-minded. People often came to her for advice or help, because she had a way of seeing solutions when others could not. Emma had grown up in the village but had always followed her own path. She worked in the nearby town as a teacher and spent her free time helping her family and neighbors. She was kind, smart, and hardworking, qualities that John admired from a distance. But he had never spoken to her personally, except for brief greetings at the market or during village events. Now, desperate and anxious, John decided he had to speak to her. He had to ask her for something extraordinary. The next morning, John walked to Emma's house. The sun had barely risen, and the air was crisp and fresh. Birds sang in the trees, and the village slowly began to stir. John's heart pounded in his chest as he approached her door. He had never done anything like this before. What if she laughed at him? What if she refused? What if she told the whole village about his request? But he had no time for hesitation. The farm depended on it. He raised his hand and knocked on the door. Emma opened the door, surprised to see John standing there so early. "Good morning, John," she said politely. "Is everything all right?" John swallowed hard and looked down at the ground for a moment before meeting her eyes. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling slightly, I need your help. I know this is sudden and it may sound strange, but I don't have anyone else to ask." Emma tilted her head, curious and a little cautious. "What do you mean?" she asked. John took a deep breath. "I need a wife by tomorrow," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Emma's eyes widened in shock. She could not believe she had heard him correctly. You need a wife by tomorrow," she repeated, her voice filled with surprise. Why would you say something like that?" John explained the situation as clearly as he could. He told her about the grant, the rules, and the approaching deadline. He told her about the farm, the animals, and everything that depended on this opportunity. Emma listened quietly, her expression shifting from shock to concern. She could see the desperation in John's eyes and the fear that the farm might be lost. She could see the sincerity in his voice, the honesty in his heart. It was clear he was not joking or trying to trick her. Emma took a step back, thinking about what she had just heard. "John, this is impossible," she said finally. "A marriage is not something you can just arrange overnight. People have feelings, families, responsibilities. You can't ask someone to do this." John nodded, understanding. "I know it sounds impossible. I know it is unusual, but I have no one else to turn to. The farm, it has to survive. I can't do it alone. I know it is a lot to ask, and I won't blame you if you refuse. I had to try." Emma looked at him carefully. She could see the weight of his words, the seriousness of his request. She could see the lines of worry on his face, the weariness in his eyes. She felt a mixture of sympathy, curiosity, and caution. She had never been asked for something like this before. She had never imagined herself in such a situation. Yet, something about John's honesty, his determination, and his vulnerability stirred something in her. After a long moment, she said quietly, I don't know if I can do this. It is not something you can simply agree to, but maybe I can help you in another way first. We can see if there is a solution that does not hurt anyone." John felt a small spark of hope. "Thank you, Emma. Anything you can do will help." Over the next few hours they talked. John explained everything about the farm, the animals, the crops, and the challenges he faced. Emma asked questions, offered advice, and carefully considered the situation. She did not promise to marry him, but she promised to help him think of options. Together, they walked through the fields, checked the barn, and examined the farm equipment. Emma saw how much effort John put into every task, how carefully he managed the animals, and how deeply he cared about the land. She began to understand why the farm meant so much to him, and why he could not give up. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma and John returned to the farmhouse. They sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the evening, the lowing of cows, the rustling of leaves, and the distant chatter of villagers returning home. John looked at Emma, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. He had asked something extraordinary and she had listened. That was more than he had hoped for. Emma smiled faintly. "John," she said softly, I think I can help, but you have to promise me one thing." "Anything?" John said immediately. "Promise me that whatever happens, we will be honest with each other," she said. "No secrets, no lies, we have to trust each other completely." John nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I promise," he said. And in that quiet moment, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, something changed. A spark of possibility ignited, and for the first time in days, John felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the impossible could become possible. Little did they both know, the days ahead would test them in ways they had never imagined. The farm, the grant, and the unexpected bond between them would change everything. And it all began with a desperate request, a kind heart, and the courage to face the unknown together. The next morning, Emma returned to John's farm, carrying a small bag of essentials. She had spent the night thinking about the strange request, the urgency in John's eyes, and the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Deep down, she knew that agreeing to stay, even temporarily, would change both of their lives, but she also felt a spark of curiosity. How could someone survive alone on such a farm? What challenges did John face every day? And what kind of man was he, really? She wanted to see for herself. John met her at the gate, smiling with a mixture of relief and nervousness. "Thank you for coming, Emma," he said, his voice calm but hopeful. "I know this is unusual, but I promise I'll do my best to make it manageable." Emma returned his smile with a small nod. "I hope so," she said. "I'm here to help, but I'm not sure exactly what I'll be doing yet." From the moment she stepped onto the farm, Emma realized that John's life was far from easy. The animals were numerous: cows, chickens, goats, and a few horses. The barn needed repairs and the fields required constant attention. Tools and machinery were scattered, some in good condition, some worn and old. The air smelled of hay, earth, and the faint odor of livestock, a smell that was both comforting and strong. Emma rolled up her sleeves and prepared herself for the day ahead. John showed her around, explaining the tasks one by one. "First, we feed the animals," he said. "Then I check the fences, water the crops, and repair anything that's broken. After that, there's always cleaning and sometimes deliveries. It's never-ending, but it keeps the farm alive." Emma listened carefully, nodding. "I can see that," she said. "It's a lot for one person." "How have you managed all this alone?" John shrugged. "I've had to. My parents left me the farm when I was young and I learned to work hard, but lately it feels like it's more than I can handle alone." He paused, looking at her with a hint of vulnerability. "That's why I asked you for help. I didn't know what else to do." Emma felt a wave of empathy. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the lines on his face, and the strength it must have taken to maintain everything by himself. She realized that her presence, even temporarily, could make a difference. They started with feeding the animals. Emma watched carefully as John measured the feed, poured water, and made sure every animal was accounted for. It was harder work than she expected. The cows were large and powerful, the chickens moved quickly, and the goats were curious and mischievous. Emma stumbled a few times, spilling some feed, and the chickens scattered, causing a small commotion. John chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Don't worry. You'll get used to it," he said kindly. As the day progressed, Emma began to understand the rhythm of the farm. Tasks followed a pattern, but each day brought new surprises. A fence might break, a gate could jam, or an animal could get sick. John worked steadily, with quiet determination, while Emma learned quickly, trying to keep up. She began to see the farm not just as land and animals, but as a living system that depended on constant care. During lunch, they sat outside under the shade of a large tree, eating sandwiches and drinking water. The sun was warm and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Emma took a moment to observe John. He was strong, careful, and patient. He spoke softly, with thoughtfulness, and treated every task with care. She realized that his life on the farm had shaped him in ways that city life could never have done. "You're very organized," she said, smiling. "Even with all this work, everything seems to have its place." John smiled back. "I have to be. If I don't, things fall apart quickly. The animals get sick, the crops fail, and the farm suffers. It's a lot of responsibility, but I care about it." After lunch, they moved on to repairing fences and checking the crops. Emma learned how to handle tools, mend broken wood, and even identify plants that needed extra care. She was surprised by how much she enjoyed the work. It was challenging, yes, but it was also rewarding. Every task completed gave her a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. As the day went on, small moments of connection began to appear. John shared stories of his childhood on the farm, of his parents, and of the lessons he had learned from them. Emma listened, fascinated by his experiences. She shared some of her own stories as well, of teaching in town, helping her family, and the small adventures of daily life. They laughed together at mistakes, celebrated small victories, and supported each other when tasks became difficult. Despite the progress, the day was not without challenges. One of the gates leading to the chicken coop broke while Emma was trying to secure it. Chickens ran everywhere, flapping and squawking, and Emma panicked. John rushed over to help, gently guiding her and calming the animals. "It's okay," he said. "Don't worry, it happens all the time. We just fix it together." After the chaos, they both laughed. Emma realized that even when things went wrong, John stayed calm and patient. It made her respect him even more. She felt a sense of teamwork developing between them, a bond formed through shared effort. Later, as the sun began to set, they moved on to watering the crops. The field stretched far and wide, the soil rich and dark, the plants green and healthy. Emma marveled at the scale of the work and the beauty of the land. She realized that John's life was not just about survival, it was about nurturing, patience, and connection to the earth. By evening, both were tired but satisfied. The barn was organized, the animals fed, the fences repaired, and the crops looked healthy. They sat together on the porch, sipping water and watching the stars appear in the sky. The air was cool and the sounds of the farm were peaceful. "You've done a lot today," John said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Emma smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. "It was hard, yes, but I also enjoyed it. I never realized how much work goes into a farm like this. You've done well." As they talked, Emma began to notice more about John. His kindness, his patience, and his dedication to the farm were qualities that went beyond hard work. He cared deeply about every living thing on the property, and he did not complain about the long hours or the challenges. Emma found herself respecting him more and more. That night, after a simple dinner, Emma settled into the small room John had prepared for her. She lay awake, thinking about the day. The farm was difficult, yes, but it was also full of life, purpose, and meaning. John was more than just a lonely farmer. He was a man of character, honesty, and strength. She realized that helping him was not just about meeting a strange request. It was about understanding, empathy, and perhaps even friendship. Meanwhile, John sat in his kitchen, sipping tea and reflecting on the day. He felt grateful that Emma had agreed to stay, even temporarily. He realized that her presence made the farm feel less lonely, her laughter and energy bringing light to a place that had been quiet for so long. He admired her intelligence, her curiosity, and her willingness to help, even when the tasks were difficult or unfamiliar. Over the next few days, Emma continued to work alongside John, learning the rhythms of farm life and becoming more comfortable with the daily tasks. They developed a routine, moving through the work together, supporting each other, and sharing small moments of humor and encouragement. The farm slowly became a place of collaboration, not just survival. Through it all, the bond between John and Emma grew. They discovered that they could rely on each other, that trust and teamwork were as important as strength and skill. Emma began to see the farm not just as a responsibility, but as a place of possibility, and John began to see that he was not alone anymore. By the end of the week, both were tired, yes, but also changed. The farm was thriving, the animals were well cared for, and the land looked healthier than it had in years. More importantly, a quiet understanding had formed between them, a sense of partnership, respect, and growing affection. They had started as strangers brought together by necessity, but they were becoming something more. And while neither of them knew what the future held, both could feel that the days ahead would bring challenges, discoveries, and changes that neither could have imagined. The farm had brought them together, and through shared effort, honesty, and a willingness to face the unexpected, they had begun a journey that could change their lives forever. The days passed quickly on the farm, with Emma and John working side by side from sunrise to sunset. The rhythm of farm life had become familiar, yet new challenges arose almost every day. Despite the long hours, both began to feel a quiet satisfaction. Emma admired John's dedication and skill, while John appreciated Emma's intelligence, energy, and determination. What had started as a desperate arrangement slowly grew into a partnership neither of them had expected. One afternoon, as the sun hung high and warm over the fields, Emma was inspecting the crops when she noticed something unusual. A patch of corn near the edge of the field was wilting. The leaves were turning yellow, and the soil looked dry despite regular watering. Emma frowned. She had learned a lot about farming, but this was new. She ran her fingers through the soil, trying to understand what was wrong. John appeared beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. "What's the matter?" he asked, noticing her worried expression. "This patch, something's wrong," Emma said. "I don't think it's getting enough water, or maybe there's a problem with the soil." John knelt down to inspect. You're right. It's unusual. I've never seen this before." He straightened up and looked at her. "We'll need to fix it before it spreads. Otherwise, it could ruin the whole crop." Together, they worked to treat the soil, moving quickly before the problem grew worse. The work was exhausting, but they encouraged each other, sharing tips and ideas. By the end of the day, the patch looked better, though not completely healed. Emma felt a sense of pride. She realized that she was not just helping, she was contributing in a meaningful way, solving problems alongside John. That evening, while they rested on the porch after a simple dinner, John's expression grew serious. "Emma, I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "about the grant and the requirements." Emma turned to him, sensing the change in tone. "What is it?" she asked. John took a deep breath. I didn't tell you everything at first. There's a clause in the grant. The marriage must be genuine, not just an arrangement. I wasn't sure how to explain it, and I didn't want to scare you off. But it's important, you know." Emma's eyes widened. You knew this all along?" she asked, her voice a mixture of shock and disappointment. John nodded slowly. "Yes, I didn't mean to deceive you. I just didn't know how else to save the farm. I hoped maybe it would work out and we could figure things out together." Emma was silent for a moment, processing the revelation. She felt a mixture of emotions: anger, confusion, and a strange sense of betrayal. She had come to the farm to help, trusting John, and now she realized the situation was more complicated than she had imagined. I need some time to think," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "This changes everything. I can't just pretend I didn't hear this." John nodded, understanding her reaction. "I know, take all the time you need. I didn't want you to feel tricked later. I wanted to be honest now." Emma went to her room that night, her mind racing. She thought about the farm, the animals, and John's honesty. She also thought about her own feelings. Over the past days, she had grown to respect and admire John. She had seen his kindness, patience, and strength. Yet now she felt uncertainty. Could she trust him fully? Could she continue to help him under these circumstances? The next morning, Emma decided to stay, but on her own terms. She explained to John that she would continue to help with the farm, but she needed clarity about their arrangement. John agreed, grateful for her decision. They both knew that trust would be essential for the days ahead. As they worked together, another challenge appeared. A wealthy outsider from a neighboring town had heard about John's farm and wanted to buy it. He offered a large sum of money, far more than the farm was worth, claiming he could modernize it and make it profitable. The news reached the village quickly, and neighbors began gossiping about the possibility of John selling. John was torn. On one hand, the offer was tempting and could solve all his financial worries. On the other hand, selling the farm meant giving up the land that had been in his family for generations. It was not just property, it was a a life he had built with his own hands. Emma watched him wrestle with the decision. "John," she said gently, "this farm is more than just money. You've worked so hard, and this land, it's part of who you are. I think you need to follow your heart, not just your wallet." John looked at her, grateful for her perspective. "You're right," he said. "It's not just about money. It's about everything this farm represents." Together, they devised a plan to protect the farm. They contacted the local agricultural office to clarify the grant's requirements, repaired fences and irrigation systems, and ensured that the farm appeared well-maintained. Emma's practical thinking complemented John's experience perfectly. She suggested new methods to improve efficiency, and he implemented them carefully. Through these challenges, their bond deepened. They began to understand each other in ways that went beyond work. Emma admired John's humility and integrity, while John appreciated Emma's intelligence, resourcefulness, and courage. Small gestures, a shared laugh over spilled feed, a hand offered during a difficult task, a quiet conversation under the stars, built a sense of closeness neither had anticipated. One evening, after a particularly long day repairing a broken fence and checking on the animals, they sat together on the porch, exhausted but satisfied. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of the fields. "I never thought I'd enjoy this kind of life," Emma said softly, watching the cows graze in the distance. John smiled. "It's not easy, but it has its rewards. You learn to appreciate the small things, the work, the land, the animals, and the people you trust." Emma nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She realized that despite the challenges, despite the unexpected complications, she was growing attached to this life, to this farm, and to John. The next few days brought more challenges. A sudden storm hit the village, with heavy rain and strong winds that threatened the crops. Emma and John worked tirelessly to secure the fields, protect the animals, and repair any damage. The storm tested their endurance, teamwork, and patience, but together they managed to save most of the farm. After the storm passed, they stood in the muddy fields looking at the damage. Emma's clothes were soaked, her hair wet, and her hands scratched, but she smiled. "We did it," she said, proud of their efforts. John nodded, smiling back. "We did. I couldn't have done it without you." Through these experiences, Emma began to understand the depth of John's character. He was not just a farmer struggling to save his land. He was a man of integrity, courage, and heart. And John, in turn, saw Emma in a new light. She was not just a helper. She was a partner, someone who could think, act, and face challenges with strength and wisdom. Yet, despite their growing closeness, uncertainty remained. The question of the grant, the requirements for a real marriage, and their feelings for each other hung in the air like an unspoken tension. Both knew that decisions would have to be made, and that the path ahead was not simple. One evening, as they prepared for dinner, Emma found an old notebook in the farmhouse. It belonged to John's parents, and it contained notes about farming, planting schedules, and thoughts on running the land. Emma flipped through the pages, reading the wisdom passed down through generations. She realized how much history and love had been poured into this farm, and it deepened her respect for John's commitment. "John," she said, looking up from the notebook, "this farm, it's incredible. It's not just land. It's a part of your family, your life, and everything you've worked for." John nodded, his eyes softening. "Yes, that's why I couldn't just give it up. It's more than money or convenience. It's my life, my parents' dream, and the future I want to build." Emma smiled, feeling a mixture of admiration and emotion. She realized that helping John was not just about meeting a requirement or saving a farm. It was about connection, respect, and understanding. As night fell, they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. The farm was quiet, the animals settled, and the air was filled with the calm of evening. Both felt a sense of peace, but also the weight of the future. The challenges were not over, and the decisions they faced would test their courage, honesty, and trust. Yet in that moment there was also hope. Hope that through their partnership, they could overcome obstacles, protect the farm, and perhaps find something even more valuable: trust, respect, and the beginnings of love. The days ahead promised to be difficult, but both John and Emma knew that together they could face whatever came. They had already survived storms, challenges, and misunderstandings, and their bond had grown stronger because of it. And while the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: neither would be alone anymore. The days that followed were filled with both hard work and quiet anticipation. John and Emma had grown used to the rhythm of life on the farm, yet there was always a sense of urgency lingering in the back of their minds. The grant deadline was approaching, and they both knew that the farm had to look its best and meet every requirement to secure its future. They continued to work together from dawn to dusk, their movements synchronized as if they had been partners for years rather than days. One morning, Emma noticed that the chickens were acting strangely. They moved nervously, clucking loudly, and some of the eggs were missing from the nests. Emma's brow furrowed as she checked the coops. "John," she called, "something isn't right with the chickens. They're restless and some of the eggs are gone." John walked over, examining the coop carefully. "Maybe a fox or a stray dog has been sneaking in at night," he said. "We'll need to set up better protection and check the fences again." Together, they reinforced the chicken coop, patched small holes in the fence, and set up extra lighting to deter any animals from entering at night. Emma marveled at how John noticed every small detail, every tiny flaw in the farm. He cared deeply for everything in his care, not just the land but the animals and even the plants. She realized that this was what made him special: his dedication and his respect for life in all its forms. Later that day, Emma and John walked through the fields to inspect the crops. The wheat was tall and golden, the vegetables healthy and thriving. The work was exhausting, yet both felt a sense of accomplishment. Each day, they learned more about each other. Emma admired John's patience and wisdom, while John respected Emma's cleverness and determination. They shared jokes, laughed over small mistakes, and supported each other through the tiring work. One afternoon, a messenger arrived from the agricultural office. John and Emma were working in the barn when the man handed them an envelope. John's hands shook slightly as he took it, knowing that inside lay the final confirmation about the grant. He opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the words. Emma watched him closely, her heart pounding with anticipation. "John, what does it say?" she asked softly. John looked up, a wide smile spreading across his face. "We did it," he said. "The grant has been approved. They said everything meets the requirements and the farm will receive support starting next month." Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We did it," she repeated, smiling. The relief was overwhelming. The farm was safe, the animals would be cared for, and the work they had put in had paid off. That evening, John prepared a simple dinner to celebrate. As they sat together, eating and talking, there was a quiet sense of triumph. They had faced storms, challenges, misunderstandings, and uncertainty, yet they had persevered. The farm had survived, and in the process, they had built something far more valuable: trust, respect, and a deep connection. After dinner, they stepped outside onto the porch. The stars twinkled above, and the air was cool and refreshing. Emma looked around at the fields, the barn, and the animals, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "John," she said softly, "this farm, it's amazing. You've done so much here, and now it will continue to thrive." John looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and something more. "Emma, I couldn't have done it without you. You came here when I needed help most, and you stayed through everything. I don't just feel grateful, I feel something more." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had begun to feel the same way, though she had not wanted to admit it. "I feel the same," she said quietly. I never expected this, but working with you, seeing your dedication and kindness, it's changed everything for me too." John reached out and took her hand gently. "Emma, I know the situation started in an unusual way, but now I want us to be honest with each other. I want this to be real, whatever we choose to do next, not just for the farm, but for us." Emma nodded, feeling tears of relief and happiness in her eyes. "Yes, John. I want that too." The next few days were filled with preparation for the official paperwork and inspections required by the grant. Emma and John worked together to ensure that every document was in order, every animal accounted for, and every field properly maintained. Their teamwork was seamless, and the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. They shared stories, dreams, and plans for the future. The farm was no longer just John's responsibility. It had become a shared vision, a symbol of their partnership and growing affection. One afternoon, as they were repairing the barn roof, Emma slipped on a wooden plank. John was immediately at her side, holding her steady. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern written across his face. Emma laughed softly, brushing off the dirt. "I'm fine." "Just a little clumsy," she said. John smiled, his eyes softening. "You're not clumsy, you've been working so hard, I don't want you to get hurt." Emma looked at him, feeling warmth and admiration. "I'm careful now," she said, smiling back. "And I trust you." The days continued with small chores and celebrations of progress. The farm was thriving, the animals were healthy, and the fields looked better than they had in years. But more importantly, Emma and John had discovered a sense of companionship and trust that neither had expected. They laughed together, supported each other, and shared quiet moments that felt special and meaningful. Finally, the day came to submit all the final documents for the grant. John and Emma stood together at the office, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The clerk reviewed the paperwork, examined the farm reports, and asked a few questions. After a tense moment, he smiled. "Everything is in order. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. John. Your farm is officially approved for the grant." Emma and John looked at each other, relief and joy shining in their eyes. They had done it. The farm was saved, the work had paid off, and their partnership had been proven through trust, effort, and dedication. On the way back to the farm, Emma and John walked hand in hand through the fields, feeling the warm sun on their faces and the gentle breeze in the air. They talked about the future, about expanding the farm, improving the animals' care, and planting new crops. But they also talked about life beyond the farm, about shared dreams, and about the bond that had grown between them. That evening, they celebrated quietly at home. Emma cooked a simple meal and they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted with warm colors, and the air was filled with the sounds of the farm settling for the night. John turned to Emma, his eyes filled with emotion. "Emma, I know this journey started in an unusual way, but now I can't imagine my life without you. I want us to continue together, not just for the farm, but for us. Will you stay?" Emma's heart swelled. She looked at John, at the farm, at everything they had built together. "Yes, John, I will stay, not because of the farm, but because of you, because of us." A smile spread across John's face, and he gently held her hand. In that moment, the struggles, the challenges, and the uncertainty all faded away. They had found something far more valuable than money or land. They had found each other. Over the following weeks, Emma and John settled into a new life together. The farm thrived, and they continued to care for it with dedication and love. Their days were filled with work, laughter, and companionship. Neighbors and villagers watched with admiration as the pair worked side by side, a team bound by trust, respect, and shared effort. Emma found joy in the simple pleasures of farm life, the sound of chickens in the morning, the smell of fresh soil, the sight of healthy crops stretching across the fields. John found comfort in her presence, her intelligence, and her unwavering support. Together they had overcome obstacles, faced uncertainty, and discovered a partnership built on honesty and care. As the sun set one evening, Emma and John stood together on the porch, looking out over the fields. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the air was warm and gentle, and the farm looked beautiful in the fading light. Emma leaned against John, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. "John," she said softly, "I never imagined that a farm could bring so much into my life, but it did, and I never imagined that helping you would lead to us." John smiled, holding her close. "Emma, neither did I. But I'm grateful every day that you stayed, that you trusted me, and that we faced this together. The farm is saved, and so are we, in a way." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The future was still uncertain in many ways, but they knew they would face it together. The farm, the animals, and the land were safe, and their bond had grown stronger than either had imagined. In the end, the strange request that had brought Emma to the farm had changed everything. What had started as an urgent, desperate need had become a journey of trust, understanding, and love. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, Emma and John knew that the days ahead would be brighter, filled with hope, hard work, and the joy of being together. The farm was more than just land. It was a symbol of resilience, dedication, and partnership. And Emma and John had discovered that the most important harvest was not the crops or the animals, but the love, respect, and trust they had grown together.